Well, here we go. So on the upside, this game barely went into overtime. On the downside, if you're a Sharks fan, it didn't go the way you wanted it to. We are going to have another Game 7. So both series in the West are going 7. There won't be any talk of, well, we had extra rest going into the next round for the Western Conference. For the East, kind of, sort of. Boston's going to have... I would think that the Eastern Conference games will start on Thursday. So I would think that Carolina and Boston will start on Thursday. I would think the winners of these series, I would think that would start on Friday. That would be my guess. But NHL schedules are determined by when buildings are open, availability, this kind of thing. So, yeah. And you know, this game, this was a tense defensive game. And the funny thing is, the shot totals were low. But it felt like when the shots happened, they were pretty grade A opportunities. Hard hitting by the Avs early. And then Jones, I thought, was the only reason this thing was scoreless through the first half of that period. And then Grubauer, as the second half of the period got going, he was equal to the task. He was just as good as was Jones at the other end. So pretty solid goaltending in a period that didn't see a ton of shots. Thornton then tripped Nieto. Thornton felt that it was a dive by Nieto. Doesn't really matter. 36 seconds later, Rantanen takes a penalty. And then in the midst of all of this, before the end of the period, Zadorov hits a post. And again, because it's a tie scoreless first period, I figure I might as well just throw that up on the board. Second period, strong start for the Avalanche. Absolutely a strong start for the Avalanche. And Jost scores from Compher and Cole. Big goal there for the Colorado Avalanche. Rantanen's then hurt in a collision with Burns. And, you know, if there's any kind of a nagging injury there, and it looked like it was hip, it could have been a Charlie horse. Charlie horses usually hurt. Really, they suck. I used to get them playing soccer every now and then, and they suck. And then they depends really on the situation. Sometimes they get better, and sometimes they just tense up. So we'll see. You know, with Rantanen. Colorado, though, I thought looked determined to force Game 7. So the shots were 11-5 Colorado in the first. The Sharks had a grand total of 7 shots in the first 30 minutes. And I didn't really think the Sharks were playing very well. That being said, shortly after that, on their 8th shot, Marc-Edouard Vlasic scores from Meyer and Nyquist to tie it at 1. And it's one of those situations where it's like, okay, they've been outplayed, but they're in a tie game. Can they steal one? The Avs seemed to be thrown by that tying goal, or the Sharks woke up, one or the other, or maybe both. It definitely seemed like the play went in favor of San Jose once we got past that halfway mark and once that first goal went in. But then JT Compher scores with 1:16 left in the second from Soderberg and Kerfoot, and you're like, okay, this game is going Colorado's way. And I got to be honest, I put tied 3-3 on the board really early in this game. I thought there's no way Colorado's losing this tonight. Burns then scored from Carlson, which I wrote, wow, next to, because there's only 10 seconds left in the period. It's only 1:06 left after Compher, or only 1:06 after Compher had made it 2-1 for the Colorado Avalanche. So we're 2-2 going into the third. The shots were only 8-8 in the second period, but both teams had 2 goals. So again, the shots weren't plentiful, but it felt like they were really solid scoring opportunities when they happened. The Avs, again, I put looked determined. The Avs absolutely looked determined, and then it's JT Compher that scores from Brassard and Wilson. It's the first time Compher's had multiple goals in a playoff game, and that made it 3-2 for the Colorado Avalanche. The Sharks were ahead 5-1 in shots, 8 minutes into the third period, but that one shot was a goal for Colorado. The Avs then were trying to trap and hold the lead. Traps are funny things. I mentioned it in the Boston Columbus review earlier tonight. Sometimes that trap can backfire. Sometimes you get into a situation where you're trapping, and then there's a vulnerability there that can get exposed. But it was low shot totals overall, and I thought that was solid defense by the Avalanche. Colorado played one of its best defensive games of the playoffs tonight, even though the score doesn't really show that. Lots of close calls for the Sharks. And then Landeskog ends up with no stick because Zadorov's breaks. So Zadorov's in front of the net. He's kind of like, hey, I need a stick. And so Landeskog hands it back because it's standard that if a defenseman doesn't have a stick, that a forward will hand his stick off. So, again, and this has happened a few times in these playoffs where it's not a shorthanded situation, but it feels like it because there's a player out there without a stick. And Vlasic scores from Couture and Nyquist. So the Sharks jump on that, and that goal ends up being the one that forces overtime. It's overtime. And it's the late game. So for people on the East Coast, it's like, oh, hell with this. And you just turn it off. Early pressure by the Sharks in overtime. They seem to be going for it, but that left them vulnerable the other way. Landeskog ends up scoring from Makar 2 minutes and 32 seconds into overtime. The shots were 2-1 Colorado in the overtime. So San Jose got the first shot. Colorado got the next two, and that second one went in. It was a really, really solid game. And yet both goaltenders come out of tonight with ugly numbers. Jones, 22 saves on 26 shots. That's the ugliest number he's put up in the playoffs in this series and since about the middle of the Vegas series. So they're going to 7 games for the second time in the playoffs. Grubauer, 19 saves on 22 shots. I thought both goalies played fine, but the numbers are going to tell you otherwise. So for Colorado, they force a Game 7. They have to go on the road and win a deciding game. They did it against Calgary. For San Jose, they're going home for Game 7 to face off against a team in a Game 7, as they did in the first round against Vegas, and they won that. So both teams should feel pretty confident going into the Game 7. And for Dallas and St. Louis, there may be a part of them that says, you know what, I'm glad that one's going to 7 as well. So Dallas and St. Louis have their Game 7 tomorrow. This Game 7 will be the night after. Whoever wins between Dallas and St. Louis gets an extra night off before that series starts. You guys can decide whether or not that's to the benefit of the team that had the rest, because we've just come off of series where the Islanders had great rest and they lost. Columbus had great rest and they lost. So that extra rest is probably there's too much expectation on a team that's had that rest. Anyways, that being said, there won't be any rest for the Sharks. There won't be any rest for the Avalanche. And in a couple of nights, we will see who the true victor is in the series. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.